Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kirsten Martzi, and it's my pleasure to welcome you tonight to this artist talk with Michael Abrams and Chief Curator Mara Williams. I'm the manager of education and community engagement programs here at Brattleboro Museum and Art Center, and we're delighted to have you here for this talk, followed by a Q&A with all of you. Admission for this program is pay as you wish. If you would like to donate to Brattleboro Museum and Art Center to support this and future arts programs, you can do so at brattleboromuseum.org/support. You'll also find information about membership on that page as well. This event is presented in connection with the exhibit Michael Abrams, Arcadia Rediscovered, which is on view through March 5th at BMAC. In tonight's program, Michael Abrams will give a talk about his exhibit, followed by a conversation with Michael and Mara Williams, BMAC's Chief Curator. You're welcome to ask questions at any time, and we'll save time at the end for Michael and Mara to answer them. To submit a question or comment, if you're here via Zoom, please use the Q&A button on your screen. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you can type your questions or comments there, and we'll keep an eye on that too. Again, you can ask your questions at any time, and we'll get to them at the end of the talk. Okay, with that housekeeping taken care of, I'd like to ask Mara and Michael to turn on their cameras and microphones now. Thank you both for being here tonight. It's great to see you. I know Michael's camera takes a second. There he is. So thank you both for being here tonight. Mara, I'll turn it over to you now.
Hi, thank you. And just so everyone knows, I'm no longer the Chief Curator. I'm Curator Emerita. Is that special? After 32 years, Sarah Freeman is now in charge of the Curatorial program. I still have some projects on the boards, but the major planning and the future vision belongs to my dear, dear, dear colleague, Sarah Freeman. So it is with great pleasure that I'm here tonight with one of my favorite people, along with a favorite artist, Michael Abrams. And we have a funny story about how we met and how I came to know Michael's work. I did not know that an artist named Michael Abrams lived in Jamaica, Vermont. But I was in New York doing some research for another show I was doing, and I was interested in an artist that was represented by Sears Payton Gallery in Chelsea. Not a gallery I had ever worked with before, but I introduced myself to talk about a particular artist and met Gaines Payton, one of the principals. And she said to me, well, what else are you working on? And I told her about some wonderful ideas that I had and that these shows were coming along in the next couple of years. And one of the things that I told her about was the show Luscious, which was looking at paint and how luscious paint is, and people who are using paint in really interesting ways that are exploiting the materiality of paint. And she said, well, you must know Michael Abrams. He lives right up by you. And I said, I'm embarrassed to say I do not. And I immediately said, oh, he's in. Just send me the slides, send me the contact information. And before I got home, I had a lovely note from Michael thanking me for my interest in his work. And we met, and he and his husband, Enrique, have just been tremendous supporters of the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center. They come to all our shows. I feel like I have my own set of groupies. So at any rate, one day I was going through Jamaica and I stopped at the home and the studio. And while I was in this fabulous studio, which got very cleaned up right now, Michael, it doesn't quite look like it did the day I came over. Michael, just how everything was arranged and what he was working on, it reminded me of my days in set design. There was something about this atmospheric work that he was doing that were like the grand set designs of another era. And I never thought about working environmentally, making an installation-based work where your paintings come alive in different dimensions, not just on the wall. And he said, well, I've done installations in the past, but I haven't thought about that in a while. So I said, go in and take a look at the Mary Summer Room. So go down there, do that. Come back if you have an idea. And he came back with an idea, and I love this installation. It's just sublime in the true sense of the word sublime, that the sort of awe and terror that you experience in front of nature at its wildest and its most grand, and it's so much larger than you are. And when you walk into this room, you sort of understand the whole art history of the sublime and what it means to you and what it means to be in touch with how that mist that he creates in the air of his paintings actually touches your skin and affects you. So Michael is going to take us on the journey, the arc of how he came to be this type of a painter and what he's most interested in, and to show you actually some of his early work, which I didn't even know of when I asked him to do this. So the slide lecture proved very edifying for me as well. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Michael, and disappear from the screen.
Okay, well, thank you so much. That was a very, very lovely introduction. I appreciate it. I guess, yes, this is Arcadia Rediscovered. I had often thought about creating an environment like the many installations I have admired at this museum. So when I welcomed Mara Williams to my studio a couple of years ago, she perceived a theatrical element in my work and inspired me to create a three-dimensional space that you walk into and experience. I've kept a simplicity to it. I like the relationship of the landscapes and nature to the architecture, that is, the floating geometric shapes of the paintings. The illusion of a curved diorama form and the ethereal nature of the projected images contrast the formal historical nature of the framed work. I'm revisiting the 19th century Arcadian tradition of landscape painting, which glorified manifest destiny, but also brought the beauty of a raw wilderness to the public. I bring to that tradition my profound respect for the natural world and my concern that we're on the verge of losing that world through our embrace of our dominance over nature. I invite viewers to experience nature as I see it, full of beauty, light, and atmosphere, and to share my trepidation about its survival. Combining a love of art history, images collected from nature, and an element of theater, Arcadia Rediscovered summons far-off scenes, diffused tree forms, and glints of light reflecting off distant waters, all suggesting a longing for that idyllic world. Within this installation are projected images. This is a rotation of 63 scenes of southern Vermont. It is what I call collected nature. Photographs are my resource, but the paintings they inspire are not documentations of places. They are painted intuitively over time. The paintings become something else entirely with an almost surreal quality. These next few images are examples of more projections. There's an audio element as well. Playing in the background are sounds of birds, occasionally rain, and wind in trees. I grew up in Rensselaer County, which is on a plateau on the east side of the Hudson River, slightly north of Albany. My bedroom window faced west with an unobstructed view of the valley and the north edge of the Catskills to the south. I didn't fully comprehend its later importance to my work, but I took in a lot of sunsets and storms over the Hudson Valley in my youth. I've always been drawn to nature as subject matter and nature's relationship and influence on landscape painters of the past. There are 3 individual works within this installation. The first is Dawn and the Impeccant Ideal. And this is The Elusive Archetype. And this is Twilight and Forgotten Allegories in its late 19th century period frame. I would say that a strong influence on my work is art history and history in general. Influences on my work are European painters like Constable and Corot, and Claude Lorraine, shown here. And then the American Hudson River School painters like Thomas Cole, Frederick Church, and Asher B. Durand. And John Frederick Kensett, here. These 19th century luminous landscape painters are among the strongest influences on my painting practice. These artists robustly and dramatically extol the virtues of nature as man's spiritual cathedral. Their ability to capture the breadth and scale of the natural world exemplified a sublime Arcadian ideal. 2 of the most prominent painters of this genre, Thomas Cole and Frederick Church, were early advocates of conservation, seeing firsthand in their travels the effects of industry on what was, up until then, a pristine wilderness. As I mentioned earlier, there has always been an element of theatricality to my work. I have often admired the sometimes showy and theatrical aspects of painting throughout history. A prime example of this would be Thomas Cole's use of allegory and symbolism. The surreal qualities of paintings like this painting from his series, The Voyage of Life, inspired my early work, especially works of the 1990s. And then Frederick Church, specifically The Heart of the Andes, a showy painted spectacle in a grand frame which becomes almost a piece of architecture. Unveiled in 1859, its enormous frame that resembled window molding only increased the painting's visual impact. So now I'd like to journey back about 4 decades. I began as a sculptor, and over the years, my work has evolved significantly. So producing a 3D installation is not a new type of format for me. This was the East Village art scene of New York in the 1980s. I was focused on painted sculpture and relief sculpture, a little tongue-in-cheek perhaps, and generally centered on myth and allegory, themes usually borrowed from post-Renaissance European painting. This and the next 2 images are from an exhibit, Mythologies, at Wolf Gallery in 1985 on East 6th Street. This is a sculpture of Apollo and Daphne, and I have Apollo attempting to cut Daphne's leaves off with a pair of shears to win her back. And this piece is after Fragonard's The Swing. And here is Victory. These pieces were painted canvas, wire mesh, hardware cloth, all-in-one armatures. We then move forward in time to the next decade. This is The Elusive Terrain, an exhibit in the early 90s at Radix Gallery on Bond Street. An architectural quality permeates the work of this period. This exhibit features architecturally framed paintings and a sculpture that is like a cupola from the top of a building, but seems to have dropped out of the sky. It's not unlike the apparitions of floating architecture which inhabit the paintings on the walls. In the next few years, the paintings lose their frames as I begin to enjoy the infinite possibilities of painted illusion in 2D form and became less interested in creating sculpture. This is from a 1996 exhibit titled The Golden Hour at K&E Gallery on Prince Street. And here we have an example from the mid-90s that continues to have surreal elements within. By the end of the 90s, there was a more profound change in how I made paintings. I began to more fully utilize glazing techniques to create more luminous depth. These were landscapes rendered in oil on canvas, somewhat simplified, but with recognizable elements from nature. The early 2000s was a period of making paintings that alluded to iconic natural scenes, abstracted landscapes that became diffused with atmosphere. This is an image from Old and Lost Rivers, my exhibit at Sears Payton Gallery in 2009. And this is a work from my exhibit, Return to Nature, at Emily Ami Gallery in Atlanta in 2010. The paintings became more tonal and minimal. Images become even more diffused and more like color field paintings. And this is A Gathered Calm at Sears Payton Gallery in 2013. And here we have a work included in Luscious, an exhibit at Bradbury Museum in 2016 that explored the beauty and tactility of paint itself. After 2016, this then started to change as I began to visually embrace the area where I live now, the Green Mountains of southern Vermont. I came to appreciate the countryside and nature in a more meaningful way. This was a slow acceptance of nature as the key focus of my painting versus the more minimal color field imagery of a decade before. Daily observations in the Green Mountains began to alter my perception and appreciation of our environment, its fragility, and our place in it. I am humbled by the striking physical character of the landscape, the unique qualities of the light and atmosphere oscillating between crystal clear and thickly obscuring, the weather changing faster than in most places. In 2019, I was invited by Jamie Franklin to participate in a fundraising exhibit at the Bennington Museum, with the theme being the writings of Robert Frost. I chose the piece, Nothing Gold Can Stay. This poem has always intrigued me as it feels like the cycle of life itself, rebirth and death. This seemed to strike a chord with my own feelings about my new surroundings. I was catching on to the live spectacle of this cycle of life in my own backyard and hillsides. It was creeping up on me slowly, but now I began to appreciate the details. The seasons changed, but always seemed different each year. Buds to dried leaves, the smell of the wet earth, the wild flowers, the birds, and the animals that are all closer than you think. The open sky, the stream softly running and at times raging, the sounds of the woods, and then sometimes silence. Nature's fragility really struck me. It's all so easily vanquished by heavy storms. Disappointing until while living amongst it, you see the resilience. It always comes back. I have tried several times to replant small maple trees to more fertile spots on the property without much luck, and they struggle. Yet they will happily grow in a pile of sand and rocks on the side of the road. This mocked my attempt at control. On this micro level, you begin to realize that we have to let nature rebuild itself and that we are interfering with its preordained qualities to do so. As Myra Williams quotes John Muir about this installation, most people are on the world, not in it, have no conscious sympathy or relationship to anything about them, undiffused, separate, and rigidly alone like marbles of polished stone, touching but separate. Before I moved to Vermont from New York City about 12 years ago, I enjoyed nature's physical beauty and used its subject matter to make paintings. I hiked through it, swam in it, but like most people, enjoyed it on a recreational level. It seemed that it was up to other people to keep it secure. If I produced Arcadia Rediscovered a few years ago, I would have attempted to use nostalgia and the viewer's memories of recreation as a connection. They would have been memories of play or fitness. I wanted to get away from that concept that nature is ours to use at our whim and our well of resources. I wanted to create an experience about how I see nature, and that what I'm translating to you is a feeling of my interpretation of how I see my immediate world. All these elements have combined to tell the story of my relationship with nature, a story that is perhaps most concerned with our letting go of the illusion that we can determine its destiny, and that has always been ours to exploit. This is deeply rooted in our Western belief systems. But while nature is enduring, our experience with it may be a fleeting moment, and we spoil our existence here at our own peril. We should humble ourselves to the realization that this planet, eons old, will endure our effect.
Thank you, Michael. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Everyone should know that I had no idea how deeply into installation you were earlier in your career. When I figured that out afterwards, I was, oh, he was a natural for this. Because I said, well, you could always have Enrique help you. Everyone should know that Michael's husband is a very talented art director, and so the window displays and environments that are in retail stores are among the work that he's done in his career. So, so you took me by surprise on this slideshow.
I have to say, one of my first jobs in New York was working as a preparator for Holly Solomon Gallery. And that was it, 1981, 82, Judy Fav, Alexis Rockman, performance artist, I'm sorry. So it was all very, everything was an installation, and everything was just, sort of a performance, each show. So it had a big effect on me.
Yeah, well, even as I said before, your paintings have a certain level of theatricality to them. I mean, they're beautiful atmospheric perspectives, but there is a level of Well, the same that you would have seen in the Hudson River School, that this is the grand vista, and there's sort of a theatrical aha of the world. Let my, let the world take a bow right here. This is what I'm celebrating. So not surprising given the era that we grew up in the New York art world either.
Yeah.
So we wanted to throw everything out for questions. I have a few questions I can probe if there are none. Kristen, do we have some questions in the chat box?
Hi, no questions yet, but you're
Okay.
welcome to put questions in the chat box. I had a question for Michael. I was wondering if you could say more about the Hudson River School painters and their environmental conservation interest.
Oh, yes. Well, about the same time I was thinking about this show, I discovered that there was a wonderful show being curated and put up at the Thomas Cole National Historic Site and the Olana State Historic Site. And the curator, Kate Mencanary of the Thomas Cole National Historic Site, put this show together on how Cole, Church, and Heed first began thinking about ideas of conservation and preservation, and how these artists interacted, inspiring an awareness of the natural world. The show was called Cross-Pollination, Heed, Cole, Church, and Our Contemporary Moment. That was from ended back in October of 2021. But there's sort of a like-minded things going on with these shows that are bringing artists or are featuring artists who are becoming more aware. And a lot of artists are talking and making work about how we live in our world, which is a big question. And we always feel like we're in a minority when we speak out like this, because you're up against a lot culturally. But there's a lot of artists that are doing wonderful things, and these artists early on, they had different ideas about what constituted spirituality, but they believed that nature had spirituality in itself, and that was kind of remarkable for its time because it was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Thomas Cole, slightly older generation than Church, born in the UK at the height of the Industrial Revolution. He came to the US and traveled to Catskill and set up his farm and really saw firsthand what was happening to early industry in the US. After being in England during that Industrial Revolution, I'm sure he saw what was coming, and I think it was quite an interesting thing for him, and he'd also who really believed in ecology and avian ecology at the time, which was kind of unusual.
Okay. Well, I see that Charlie Hunter has been busy in the chat. I don't know, Kristen, if you know, he's a wonderful painter, and he's got a lot of technique questions. So do you want to go through those?
Well, first,
a lot of technique questions.
Oh,
Sure.
first, I really enjoyed his show, and I find the atmosphere in his work, I was just blown away by. So yes.
Great. Yeah, Charlie asks, he says, this stuff is beautiful. Any hard edges in the recent work? And there's a few. Do you want me to read them all? Read all the questions?
Go through the list, because
Okay.
then.
Yeah. So any hard edges in the recent work? Can he expound about his technique some? How is the paint applied? What is his substrate? In terms of spirituality, I do see a connection to Inez in the gauzy romanticism of his work.
Yes. Sometimes I do play with a harder edge to bring something in focus. It always eludes me. Every time I do try it, I seem to fuzz it out again, you know. So, but it does help that one. I guess there's a bit of edges in that large painting in the installation, but it's all, I would say it becomes diffused. When I start a painting, there are often more edges and more sort of hard brush strokes, and they usually end up getting painted over. But yes, I keep, let's say at the painting that was in Luscious, I mean, someone asked me if I used an airbrush for that, and I was like taken aback because, you know, it's all brush, and I seem to have gotten away from that a little bit, and there is more brush strokes, and there is some edges to the brush strokes. So yes, I can see that developing more.
Well, that's certainly true in the entry pieces, where it seems to be a very quick, almost underpainting in the
Yes.
it has the curved edge and the one above it, where they look like they were sketches, even plein air sketches that were done. So there's an absolute mark making, quick decision making on defining the trees in those sections. Yeah. But once you start with your glazes, I mean, you really, if you're seeing the work in person, you can look through the glaze and actually see that it's brush work.
Yes.
The level of glazing and the gloss and the depth you achieve in a very, very thin surface is just quite remarkable, actually, as a technical feat.
Oh, yes.
But you and Charlie should just go to mutual studio visits. He's only in Bellows Falls. You're in Jamaica.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
I
would love that. Yes.
Other questions?
Yeah, so we had another, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I had more questions from other folks, but Charlie asked about your substrate.
Oh, yes.
How the paint is applied.
Yes. Gesso on canvas or panel. And I'd say I like panel, but it's hard to get a large panel made, you know, to sort of correctly and without warp, to keep it from warping. It needs to be well done. And so I rely on canvas, but I really feel I should be working on panel because of the kind of glazing I'm doing. And sometimes on smaller work, if it's on a panel, it just has a glowier feel. You don't get the texture of the canvas, so you get more luminous depth, and that is very nice.
We had another question from Kathy asking what medium you use in glazing.
Oh, it's Galkyd. It's a Gamblin. It's a medium made by Gamblin, and that's cut with Gamsol and to varying degrees, and then it's just sort of smeared into the paint on a large palette, and then brushed onto the painting. The glazes aren't mixed. Let's say they're not mixed in volume first and then applied. It's kind of per brush amount, I would say.
Remarkably consistent for doing it that way.
Yeah, it's I think my obsessiveness helps with that.
You must be a good baker.
I'm not. No. I wouldn't subject anyone to my cooking.
We had another question on a technical level. Well, this thing I think you might have already answered. Could you please talk a bit about your approach in terms of how you start a painting, the nature of your glazes and layers? Maybe you could say a bit more about your process.
Yes. I think I guess they do start like sketches, and they start with a kind of drawing in my head, I must say. As I look at photos, as I said, I take a lot of photos, and then I end up not really copying them or thinking of any painting as a specific place. It is just, I guess, visual information, and then I try not to dwell too much on what the photo looks like, but the feel of the photo. The painting starts, and I just keep adding glazes. I wipe some away with rags to create light spots, and then continue to add more glazes, dark spots, and light spots. And then eventually I add more opaque paint and add whites in with the paint, which creates an opaqueness and a fogginess. And that seems to create a lot more depth. For instance, I'll almost finish a painting and then put a very fine layer of a blue glaze over it, using like a straight pigment, and that diffuses it even more. So you end up having different things happening at different times, and it's all intuitive. I have no idea really how these things are going to come out.
Thank you.
Okay.
A lot
Anything?
of technical questions. We have more questions from the Q&A. Trying to find one. So this person asked, James asked, how would you desire your work to affect the current landscape genre?
Oh, that's interesting. I know there's a lot of people making landscapes, and you can look out on the internet and see so much, and on Instagram, and it's all quite wonderful. You begin to realize what you're doing is not unique, and that you just find your own voice. I do like the idea of schools of art, like the Hudson River School painters, and I like it when I relate to someone else's work very much. There's a lot of influences on my work, a lot of current influences and past influences. So people I've seen in New York. There's a wonderful painter that I really love her work, Jane Bloodgood Abrams. She has a show up now at Carrie Haddad Gallery, and we have a similar feel about luminosity that I think is very, very nice. I guess I don't know where it fits in contemporary art. I'm glad it does now, in a way, because the few decades I was in New York, figurative painting and landscape painting were not very fashionable. Abstraction, neo-geo, new image painting, there were lots of other things that were. It's very nice to move to an area like this area of Vermont, meet so many artists who are working similarly like you. This has been very, very nice.
Great. This Bridget asks, is your color choice for the paintings and the works in the show influenced by the photo process of cyanotype? That early type of photography seems to meld well with your interest in 19th century views.
Yes, definitely. I love that simple blue color, and I enjoy. I don't know. I'm drawn to the color blue. If someone puts a blue painting up, I just love it automatically. So that's I don't know if it's good or a handicap. I don't know, but I'm drawn to that color. endless. It's the sky, it's water, it's a lot about the earth. So yes, I mean, when you paint a landscape, you seem to, pick the colors. You may have seen some of the earlier work. There's lots of red colors and lots of yellow color, and it was more earthy. And I seem to have grown out of that. I don't know if it's living in Vermont or not, but I guess the quality of the air and the light, everything seems to have a blue cast.
We had another color question from Betsy asking, your photos look very monochromatic. Do you use colors from the photos, or is your approach more abstract? The turquoise that you use looks more imaginary than naturalistic.
Yes, I would say very imaginary, and I think in terms of just a few colors, I don't buy a lot of different colored tubes. It's like 5 or 6, and they're all basically primary colors. And they end up being mixed on the painting via having overlays of glazes. So the color mixing usually happens during the process of the painting. As I build up the layers, it's not a very conscious pre-mixing or thoughtful approach in maybe a more traditional way. But yes, I kind of like colors, blues especially, that you don't find in the world. I mean, it alludes to the world, but I think if you give someone an idea of something or a vague concept, their mind or their emotions sort of take it to a different place, using familiar thoughts and memories.
That really ties into this next anonymous question. They ask, the hazy, misty, gauzy, sometimes dimly lit imagery in your paintings seems to connote dreams or memories. Is that deliberate on your part?
Yes. I like the idea when you listen to the radio, you listen to an old show on the radio or someone talking on the radio telling a story, or just storytelling in general. Your brain creates a movie itself and fills in all the details. Whether you're conscious of it or not, all the information is there from our personal experiences, and I think painting does that too, because we're making, as a landscape painter, you're making things that allude to a real place, even though they may not be real places. People think they might be real places. So yes, it triggers memory, and it triggers emotional feelings. Thoughts of what you've done in nature, or just in terms of some beautiful thing you saw a long time ago. That maybe it may have been a photography show or just something of that nature. I mean, it all comes back to you.
Yeah, that relates to Charlie. Made another comment. He said, "I'm drawn to how tragic these romanticized landscapes are. They seem suspended between reality and dream." His statement was fairly political, but the paintings themselves seem to me to diffuse any angry message into one, not unlike the final line in the movie Don't Look Up, which was, "We really had everything, didn't we?"
Yes. I guess the message, really, very few people want to hear this kind of message because it's not fun, So I guess we have to make it beautiful and alluring, and we have to invite people to think about things. As I said in my statement, we don't want to make such a direct connection that it is, such an obvious thing, but I like the idea that you can make someone feel something, and maybe then make them think about what they're looking at. And then the next step is they go outside and they look at the trees in their yard in a different way, and maybe they'll start thinking about the little animals that live in it, and perhaps not use so much poison or something. I mean, when you poison, let's say you use pesticides in your house to eradicate any animals that are coming in, you're actually poisoning the owls and foxes, and it's a chain reaction. So it would be nice if everyone thought of that effect.
Yes, it's habitat.
Yes.
We keep the land in a certain way, but loss of habitat is affecting animal populations around the world. I don't think we think about it that way. The land is the land, the animals are the animals. Everything is sort of atomized, as opposed to systematically looked at.
Yes.
So
that's my experience in the last several years living in Vermont. I mean, you see the little voles digging their way around eating grubs, and the hummingbirds make their nests, and it's all quite wonderful. And you don't see that really unless you sit there and stare at it,
I've been staring outside at the sky and at my little voles and moles a whole lot more in the last year and a half before.
Yes.
And with my crappy camera phone, I take pictures of these glorious sunsets and these changes of light. And,
Yes.
I happen to have a very nice big sky view at this house, but I've just, in the last year, I always thought I noticed things, but I've never noticed how many gorgeous passages of light and clouds and drama there is in my own backyard. But this sort of forced living within the four walls, it's really, really sharpened, I think, my eyes over the last year and a half.
It does. We spend a lot of time looking at the birds outside at the feeders, and there's a black squirrel, a red squirrel, and a gray squirrel, and they're all there. It's kind of amusing.
We had a question from Kathy who asks, if you do plein air painting and if you play with painting, what would you or do you do?
Oh, I keep thinking about doing that, but I'm not sure I'm not a good renderer, so I often struggle with going to a hilltop and trying to render something. I've never been very good at that, which is why I've always tried to either make physical things or use color. And I've gotten around, not being a very good draftsperson, or having that kind of talent by using these other methods. And so I think of it in a different way. I had done, yes, they are, they're studio paintings, but what has helped me is the photography end of it, and taking the photo, but also manipulating the photo so it's not exactly the thing that is the concrete image. So just softening it or changing the color or the quality, the depth, and making it into kind of loose sketch. That has helped a lot, and probably for me, that is, it feels like plein air. But I love the idea of doing that, and there's so many people that are just so wonderful at it. And, I'd love to see.
That's how you like Charlie's show.
Yes.
Your photos are beautiful. We had a comment about them. James said, I'm impressed with your photographs and how beautifully composed they are. They seem to lead you directly to the paintings. Are the paintings usually or always set up from photos?
Yes. I mean, I guess I've actually taken a lot of images from the meadows. It's a wonderful place to get water and trees. And now it just looks, it's kind of, it's lost all its leaves. But in the spring and summer and fall, the tree groupings, it's just kind of magical how they sit on the water. Just seem to, it's a unique place.
Yeah, I feel like seeing your paintings and knowing that you live in Jamaica and have this beautiful, like move to Vermont to live in this beautiful setting, you feel that love for nature in your paintings, and it kind of invites you into, like you said, into your view of the natural world. So that's something that I
Yes.
really love about your work. Had another question from Renee. Says, hi, Michael, I saw your beautiful exhibition today.
Yes.
The paintings render the sentient nature of landscape for sure. The surface is so seductive. Do you consider yourself a transcendentalist? Also, just curious, not meaning to place you in a specific genre or box.
A transcendentalist. I'm not sure exactly if I know what that means. Sort of, I guess.
Century.
Huh? I'm sorry.
It's very 19th century to be a transcendentalist.
Oh, yes. Well, the influences on my work from, I would say, having been an art history major, there's the Barbizon School and all of that. And I went through the entire, I remember in college going through, the history, Western art history, and basically, you end up doing things like that, in classes. So that was kind of fun. And then there are the spiritualists who are kind of fascinating. And I guess I've always wanted to I always thought of my work as having a slight spiritual quality in that it transcends the natural world. Just the basic point of, the point of view in the paintings is slightly above ground. You're hovering and you're looking down on the ground a little bit. So you get this separation from your earthly domain in a way.
Renee also said, the shutter of the camera excludes the past and the future while your paintings make space for memory and dreams. And I think a lot of people in the comments are just loving hearing you talk about your work and your perspective. I love that idea of hovering over the ground. It's so true, that perspective. Yeah.
Yes. It's interesting. I see myself doing more photography too, just because it's been kind of nice to try a new medium and try something that you can manipulate in a different way. So that's been kind of a bigger adventure with this particular show too, where I really thought about going out and taking lots more photos and looking at things more. When I painted in New York before I moved here, I really struggled with what I was painting, and I really felt kind of a drought of information. You could drive out of the city and go to parks, and drive to the top of the hill, drive to the top of the mountain, and you look around, you go for a hike. But it's not the same as living in it.
Definitely. I love the immersive quality of your show with the sound environment and the projection of your photographs and the way the paintings kind of hug you and come away from the walls. It really feels like you're stepping into something special, like you feel immediately removed from the rest of the galleries.
Well, I was thinking of different ways to invite the viewer in. And I had made a model, a cardboard model, and tried different things. I tried getting the viewer in, capturing the viewer, having them turn around and then see the thing. And the room is too small for that. So that was one idea. And then at first there was a facsimile set up in the garage. The exact same room was built. The Merry Summer Room was rebuilt in the garage here, and the installation was begun in it and changed a lot. And at first, it was very, very busy with lots of more sort of architectural or sculptural aspects to it. And once again, the space was too small, and the idea of the projection and the lighting, it required less. It just required a more minimal handling of it. So lots of things kept getting removed and cut out. And then the projection. Sarah Freeman came with a projector, and we started projecting the things on the walls, and that told us a lot about how it should look and what shape something should be. So the paper diorama shape was changed completely, and that apparatus was rebuilt into the format it is now to accommodate the projection, because the projection became such a big part of the piece at that point, and it was a much smaller part previously. Or there were going to be many of them or several of them, and they would be smaller idea sections, but became such a prominent feature because they became like a painting themselves on the wall to accompany the other paintings.
Well, they read so silvery on the colors that you chose and the quality of light that you have in them. I know that they're digital photographs, but there's almost that silver or platinum toning to them on the walls.
Yes.
What strikes me about the installation, having gone into it now several times and spent time in there, is that it's a whole piece, and it flows beautifully. It's got the diorama section and the other section, and then the photograph. Is that in some ways it's almost, to me, reads like the thought process of the making of everything for you. That there's this large diorama section that comes out in curls, and it's sort of like a big expansive brushwork. And then there's another sketch, and then there are all these thought ideas and visions and changing photographs of the land that you're living in and thinking about, and then you turn to this marvelous large scale painting that is bigger than my body, so I really feel like I'm falling into it. And then as you turn, you come out, and there's this gem of an easel-sized painting in a very elaborate frame that harks back again to that Hudson River School idea of where this painting is coming out of its own art history. So there's something about it that feels like I'm looking at your whole mind and your process and all your sketchbooks at once, and yet it's completely refined. It's all that and more somehow.
Yes, when I was doing the model and I was doing preliminary sketches 2 years ago, it was a more specific journey and kind of a transition from sketch to photo, or from photo to sketch to painting. It was much more blatant. as to what I was doing. And then it got more mixed up, and some things kind of blended into other things. The idea of doing projection and sound, and maybe think about the piece as more as a whole experience, rather than, you know, a show you would walk into and see the various stages of this person's development or this person's technique. And I like that. I like that. I had to do this. I like that I had to. I like that you asked me to do this, and I had to do it because it made me turn a corner about what I think my art is. After a few decades of making paintings and showing paintings and then hoping they will sell, this is completely different and refreshing, because it's not about that at all. It's about the experience. And as an artist, you know, or someone who makes movies, or anyone, someone who makes music, you want to relate that. You want people to enjoy an experience. And I think in our culture, things become commodities, and sometimes that's good. You know, it pays the mortgage, and then sometimes it's bad. You know, you lose sight of what an experience truly can be. So this is the end result here. I love walking into that room, because and every time I do, I sometimes say, I cannot believe I made this thing, because this is new in my head, relatively, compared to all the work I've done.
That's great. We have a couple more questions before we wrap up. One relates to what you were just saying. Brian asks, or he says, we love seeing your work evolve over the years. Do you plan to do sculpture again? And what's next for you? When is your next show, and where?
Oh, well, as far as shows, I don't know. I would actually like to do more of this kind of thing somewhere in an you know, in an art center or museum, or you know, an airport. Or, you know, it would be really nice to be able to do another large thing that is sort of bigger than a painting. You know, bigger than a single experience. Sculpture, I'm not sure. I like the idea of, I almost put a sculpture in this piece. I thought about it, and there was various things I was going to do, but it didn't really gel. So, but yes, that is on my mind, to do 3D things again, because I did enjoy it, and I was a sculptor from, you know, a young man to when I started concentrating on only paintings. And I don't know, part of it was economic too. It was just impossible to make sculpture in New York, you know, you know, and do it with the materials you would want. It's somewhat limiting. I guess I enjoy, you know, I enjoy making things, so anything is possible. You know?
Well, we're excited to see what comes next.
Yes, we'll see.
This question, I think Mara might be interested in answering. Betsy asks, how do you think the notion of the sublime has changed in the 21st century versus the 19th?
Well, the word is misused more often than not. And you know, that's just from the architecture of the philosophy. You know, the sublime has a very definite meaning. People use the word sublime. Oh, that was a sublime piece of pie. Well, or people think that beauty is sublime, and the sublime is different from beauty as a philosophical construct. But you know, if you've ever gone to the Alps, if you've ever, you know, crested a mountain and just that expanse is below you, or if you've ever seen a storm raging, like I had a tornado chase me up 91 once. It ended up hitting it. It ended up hitting in Springfield, of all things. It became a water spout in Springfield, but I could tell the sky was changing behind me in the rear view mirror. The color was really weird. And I was just like, I sped up that area. I just knew something was wrong. And the ferocity of nature when you're seeing it is terrifying. It's awe and it's terror. And if it's not about to kill you, however, it's almost surreal in its power and how insignificant you feel. And that's what the sublime is really all about. So, and then people tried to capture that. I mean, it was really something they sought to capture, that feeling of scale, monumentality, and the raging river or the raging wind in painting in the 19th century, 18th and 19th century. I don't know. I mean, I know Stephen Hannock deals with issues about the sublime all the time. And I think that Michael is dealing with part of that equation, but it is a philosophical equation. So I'm not, I see the word misused. And so when somebody asks me a question like this, I'm kind of like, I'm not sure people are thinking about the same things about the sublime that I think about the sublime. So I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer it.
Mm. It reminds me of the Mont Blanc by Percy Shelley, that poem.
Yeah.
The everlasting universe of things rolls through the mind. I think about that poem, but actually when I look at your paintings too, Michael.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So we put all of these presentations up on our website, don't we? Someone just asked that question. So
yeah, so this will be this is recorded and it'll be live on the website, and we'll have a transcript of it as well. So we'll put all of that up on the site. And then we just have a few nice comments I can roll through, Michael, and then we can wrap up. Renee says you've captured the unique event of river valley fog. And Karen says, thanks for this. Michael is a wonderful friend of mine, and his paintings just lit me into another place. Betsy says, congratulations. And then Charlie wants to invite us all up to his studio, and we can have some coffee. So
yes, or something harder.
Well, Charlie, let me talk to you through this internet-y thing that we're doing. Once all of this craziness is over, we used to do little like field trips. So I would love to put together a field trip up to your studio, because it's a fascinating, it's a fascinating place. Bellows Falls is fascinating.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we did a studio visit with Charlie in the fall.
Oh, you did? Oh.
Yeah.
Well, then
over the summer. It was a summer.
Anyway, it's always a good time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but thank you both. I think we're gonna start wrapping up. We just more lovely comment, more thank yous coming in through the chat. Bridget says, wonderful show. Leslie says, thank you for sharing your vision and beautiful works.
Okay, Happy New Year, everyone, and thank you, Michael.
Yeah, I have a few closing comments that I want to share. Just a reminder that this is being recorded, and you can find it on our website after the fact. And Michael has a limited edition print available for sale at our gift shop called Silver Rushes. So I encourage you to check that out and purchase one if you're interested. It's beautiful. And our website is brattleboromuseum.org. That's where you'll find information about Michael's show. Our hours are 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Wednesday through Sunday. I highly encourage you to see the show in person. It's really worth seeing. And let's see, admission is pay as you wish if you do come to the museum. And if you'd like to make a donation to support tonight's program, this and other free programs like this, would be very grateful for that. You can do that at our website, brattleboromuseum.org/support. Thank you both.
Make sure if you haven't seen Michael's show, come early, come often. It's really a wonderful, wonderful place to just go in and commit to the aesthetic moment.
Oh, I just wanted to add, I wanted to thank Mara for encouraging me to expand my vision. I want to thank Sarah Freeman for her brilliant direction and making this process so very easy for me. She was wonderful. Erin Jenkins, fantastic promotional work and some timely visual help with some imagery when I was struggling to paint reeds in water. Thank you so much, Erin. And Kirsten for coordinating this. And I want to thank Danny Lechtenfeld being incredibly supportive for both Enrique and I and the museum. So I really appreciate it. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Night,
Okay,
everyone.
good night.
Thank you.